I'm gonna forego any more professional intro for this and just jump right in. Court of Silver Flames comes out February 16th. So we're gonna reread ACOTAR to get ready for it. I am so excited. This is like the first book of 2021 that is coming out that I'm like really pumped up about. So I can't wait. So I want to reread all of the other books leading up. It has been like 6 or 7 months since I've read them, which I guess maybe to some people doesn't sound like a long time, but when I read like hundreds of books, there's a lot of time in between these, or I get a lot of other content in between. So I'm really excited to reread these again. I'm excited now to kind of pay more attention, I guess, for Nesta and Cassian, knowing that Silver Flames is going to really focus on them. I'm really excited to reread them, so let's go. Okay, I only just finished the first chapter, but if I'm being honest, I've only read the first like 8 chapters of this book once. When I went back and reread it, I skipped to when Tamlin showed up and like took her away because I was bored at the beginning of this. But that first chapter, it's crazy now looking back at how 8 pages was the catalyst for this entire book and so many things falling into place that now the first chapter doesn't seem so boring to me, where I think upon first reading I was like, why do I need to read 8 pages about her killing a wolf? But now I get it. I'm too comfy to get up, but I'm on chapter 11, and it's hard to know if I'm biased from already knowing how the story goes, or if like I really felt this way, but I genuinely don't remember on my first read really like loving Tamlin. I think I thought he was fine, like that I liked him and Feyre together, but he wasn't like my favorite character that I had ever read. But this time around, like I'm just like, I don't really care for him in the way that, like, you know, you get drawn in by these book characters. I don't know. So I feel that way again, but Lucien I'm liking almost more. He's just really sassy, and I don't really necessarily remember that about him. I think I mostly just remember him like moping about Elaine. So I'm really liking getting that side of Lucien again. Okay, so right at the end of chapter 11, I don't remember this, but Feyre has a nightmare about killing Andrus, the wolf, from the beginning, but like seeing him as a man when she kills him. And that's like a bit of foreshadowing for the end of this book and kind of leading into Mist and Fury and her trauma over killing the people at the end of this book. That, I don't know, that was just a little bit of foreshadowing that I definitely didn't pick up before. And other thing, I really like the introduction of Lucien and Feyre's friendship in this book. I really appreciate that. That was something that I don't think I necessarily appreciated as much the first time around, because I think I just had not like the best opinion of Lucien. I didn't dislike him, but he also wasn't necessarily my favorite, but I'm vibing with him again. But again, like I don't give a fuck about Tamlin, honestly. I'm trying to just like sit back and enjoy this time with Feyre in the Spring Court and enjoy like her relationship progression with Tamlin and with Lucien and just her character progression in this part. But it's hard not to sit here and just want Rhys and Mor and Amren and Cass and Az. Like, I don't know. I just really want the inner circle, man. But I'm trying to enjoy it. But I miss them. We're looking rough, but it is what it is. I'm on chapter 19, I think, of ACOTAR, and the scene with the fairy whose wings got cut off by Amarantha, and like Tamlin brought that fairy back to the mansion, and like him and Feyre basically just like held him and comforted him as he died. This really, again, I like that scene for a lot of reasons. I like it for Feyre's character for a lot of reasons, but also I do really like it for Tamlin's. Tamlin is a very complicated character, and I feel like that is something that I could have, like, that I could ramble on for a really long time for. But just right now, I just want to say, like, in that moment when he knew that he needed to go and bury this fairy and be there for that fairy when they died and do that prayer for them, like, Tamlin inherently is not a bad person. Like, don't come at me, people. I don't like him. I don't like his character. Or, like, I don't like him as a character. But is his character like a bad character? No, I think it's like he's actually like a really well fleshed out character, and there is definitely room in the future for a redemption arc for him. Like, he is not an unredeemable character in my book, and his actions just like make sense with the way that he internalizes things that have happened to him. Like, he's a very sad, lonely person in the beginning of this book, and obviously then he starts like finding joy with Feyre. So then in Mist and Fury, like, obviously his actions are inexcusable, and his actions in Wings and Ruin are inexcusable, and I'll talk more about those when we get to them. But they make logical sense for his character and like why he behaves the way that he does, which is all I want in storytelling. Is I want characters' actions to make sense to who they are, and I don't want things like coming out of left field. And I feel like Sarah J. Maas does a pretty good job of that with all of her characters. They all seem like pretty on brand, honestly, and Tamlin is like a pretty consistent guy. That moment reminded me that like Tamlin is not just like a horrible person. He has done and said horrible things, but I don't think inherently he is evil. We're gonna be talking about Nesta a lot, but I just want to say I don't hate Nesta, and I don't think she's like an unredeemable character. But when people say that like she is the way that she is because she was like turned Fae against her will, honestly, that's why she treats Feyre and Rhys and everyone like this later on in the series. But like, this book right here, she's rude, she's nasty. Like, it's not like she changed into a Fae and then all of a sudden she's rude and like nasty. She's been nasty her whole life. So I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with the argument that Nesta is this way because of what happens at the end of Mist and Fury. I think she's like always been this way, and like her behavior is just like unacceptable to me. Again, like, I'm way too early on. I'm not even to really like many of her scenes, just from what I'm seeing in like this book again. Like, I've just never been a huge Nesta fan. I've never like disliked her, but I've never liked her character either. And with that said, I don't necessarily like Elaine either. They both suck in my opinion. This is what I'm saying, is that looking back on this book, you're catching the red flags that were there from the beginning about Tamlin and like his behavior towards Feyre. I'm on page 178 and they're talking about Calanmai and how he's like, you will stay in the house, like you will not leave the house during this. What happens in the next book? So that is what is so great about the reread on this, is picking up on those little red flags that Sarah J. Maas planted about Tamlin, so that way in Mist and Fury it didn't seem like out of left field. Or if people thought so, then I don't necessarily think you were like paying attention in the first book, or maybe you need to like go back and see the first book, because Tamlin does have these little red flags popping up that makes him a little sketch. Rhys is here, and we are blessed. Tamlin's always telling Feyre what the hell she can and can't do, and I'm ready for Rhys to be around when he's like, it's your choice. And I think some people get annoyed with Rhys, that he's constantly like assuring Feyre that it's her choice. What do you think about it? She's literally never had a choice her whole life. Like, she was basically forced to take care of her whole family. Then with Tamlin, she never really got to make any of her own choices. I like that Rhys constantly reminds her of that. Like, she needs that. Just finished chapter 22, where Feyre shows Tamlin all of her paintings, and he picks out the one from the woods, which she doesn't really like, but he says that it reminds her that he's not alone. I think one thing that I don't remember realizing so much was that like Tamlin and Feyre were like in love, and the people that they are in this book work really well together. They're a good match in this book, but after the events of the end of the book, they no longer can get what they need from the other person. And I think it's just like a logical relationship progression, and they both change by the end of this first book, and they're no longer the same people that they fell in love with, which then makes sense for the actions in Mist and Fury. It's just kind of cool to be reminded that like at one point they were like they were perfect for each other. Okay, I just finished chapter 26 when Rhys shows up. What an introduction. I'm gonna be honest, I kind of forgot about this side of Rhys because of obviously how he is in Mist and Fury and Wings and Ruin, and I missed this Rhys. I love a good sassy Rhys, and he's just fun. He's fun when he's bad, but like I naturally like the villains more, even though we know Rhys isn't the villain. In that chapter, he definitely behaves like one, and I loved it. I will just say, again, we get an instance of Tamlin not doing anything really to help Feyre and just sitting along by the side while she's being threatened. Foreshadowing. Okay, I'll stop with the foreshadowing now, but again, as Tamlin and Feyre are talking right now, as he's like, I'm sending you back home, and she's like, please let me help you, like, what can I do? And he's like, nope, I'm sending you home, and she's like, let me do something, and he's like, I need you safe. The irony. I just washed my face. I'm gonna kind of get ready for bed here before I finish reading. So I have like less than 100 pages left. So I think I am just gonna go ahead and finish it tonight. Feyre just completed her first trial, which was fun to read again, but also like a little less anticlimactic now that I know like what happens. There are certain moments that when I reread, they were still like just as fun the first time around, and while that was still like fun, it wasn't like as, oh my god. Under the Mountain part was definitely like my favorite part of the book the first and second time I read it, and while that was awesome, I think I just appreciated more this time around reading about the time in the Spring Court again, and like her and Tamlin's relationship progression, and like Feyre's character progression. But I think I just like took more time to appreciate how Sarah J. Maas built up the relationship between the two of them, because like I think I forgot how much Feyre like loved Tamlin. Feyre, darling. It's been so long since I've heard that. Okay, another thing that was just stupid of me, but I remember the first time reading when I'm on page 381, when Tamlin and Feyre had like a little moment the night before the third trial and being like, oh, like nice, you tried to have one final moment with her. Fuck that. Tamlin, you piece of shit. Like, he did nothing this whole time. And then as Feyre realizes in Mist and Fury, she's like, he had a chance to like do something and he just tried to fuck me. Yeah, that's concerning, and he just sucks. Okay, I'm very early on in Mist and Fury. Already, I kind of forgot I haven't reread Mist and Fury since I read the Throne of Glass series, and Heir of Fire and Mist and Fury are kind of giving me like similar vibes in terms of like where Aelin and Feyre both are at the start of this book, and then like thinking ahead to the journey that Feyre goes through, it like feels a lot like Aelin and Heir of Fire. Okay, so Feyre just got back to the Spring Court after her first week in the Night Court, and honestly there hasn't really been anything new that I like noticed on that first reread, except for just like how deep in her grief Feyre's character is right now, and I'm kind of loving just because like that makes the journey all the more worthwhile to read and go along with her on. And again, Rhys is already reiterating that it's her choice, and I don't get the Rhys slander. I love Rhys, but the Tamlin slander is about to start because Tamlin's already pissing me off. And Lucian's standing by and doing nothing right now, but I mean, we all know how that ends up anyways. There's nothing that I read in particular that made me think of it. It's more just a reminder, reading this book, of how well Sarah J. Maas does of jumping from one love interest to the other and not having it feel forced. In the first book, like, she really sells us Tamlin and Feyre. And in Mist and Fury, there's no way that you, like, ship Tamlin and Feyre anymore by like the halfway point of the book. There's just like really no way how you do. And if you do, I'd like to hear from you because I'm curious as to why you would still ship Tamlin and Feyre. And you just know that Rhys and Feyre are like meant to be together. And I think that that's the same way in Throne of Glass. Kale and Celaena feel right in Crown of Midnight, at least to me personally. I know some people like that's a little more like eh. But in Crown of Midnight, I bought into Kale and Celaena. And then in Heir of Fire, I was like, Kale who? Like there was no one else for me. And I just think that that's so, it's just so well done to me that I go from like so passionately buying into one couple to then like switching and not really ever looking back. So I don't know. I mean, props to her writing style for that, to be able to do that, because I think that's like tricky to pull off. So I just finished chapter 16, which is when Feyre meets all of the inner circle and they have dinner and she agrees to work with them. And the camaraderie and the friendship that the inner circle has, it's just, I love it. I love the banter. I love the history. I love the relationships within that circle. And it's something that I've noticed that I really am drawn to in books, especially in series. And it's the thing that like keeps me invested. And I'm loving that we have Az and Cass and Mor and Amren finally around. And I'm ready for everything that's coming up now. Okay, so Feyre and Rhys just went to go see the bone carver. Oh, what a dude. As Feyre's offering up the truths about her death and how she admitted that if it wouldn't have been Tamlin, she would have stabbed herself in the heart for the third and final person. And I think an underrated part of this book is like so much of it is focused on Feyre's journey, and like me, I'm so focused on Feyre's journey, but it's also like when you think about it, how painful it is for Rhys to hear Feyre's thoughts, to hear her despair, and not really be able to do anything about it, and not be able to tell her, and like know that that's his mate and that she's suffering so much, and he just has to like stand there and do what he can to help alleviate that, but really she has to do it on her own. Another day, another night being sad that no one's told me that I'm their salvation. It's fine. It's fine. Did you enjoy the sight of me kneeling before you? Rhys, motherfucking man. Okay, I completely forgot that Rhys also broke Ianthe's hand. I just read the chapter where Rhys shows Feyre his memory of Ianthe to kind of explain like why he obviously hates her because she sucks. And I forgot that he also broke her hand, so that when she breaks her hand in Wings and Ruin, just couple things, you know. But Ianthe is actual scum. And I was just thinking while reading that in Rhys's point of view, I get why these aren't told in dual POVs, but I would have loved to have gotten Rhys's POV, especially in the beginning of this book when Feyre's in the Spring Court. I would have liked to have gotten a POV of him under the mountain. I think like a lot of the times when authors go back and rewrite books to write them from like the male character's perspective, they're kind of are boring to me, if I'm being honest, because it's like the same story. But this one I actually think would be really interesting and really give great insight to the story, and just Rhys in general. I think Rhys is a super interesting and complex character, and I would love to read the story from his point of view when he knows that Feyre's his mate, but she's in the Spring Court, when he knows that like she's dying, but like he can't help her, when he's like trying to manipulate Amarantha under the mountain. Like there are just so many times. Cassian's spitting straight facts when he's telling Nesta off in their first meeting and like telling her to stop being so rude to Feyre when like none of this was Feyre's choice. She risked her life to save her people and also her sisters, and like Nesta never did shit. And I hear no lies from Mr. Cassian, so this interaction and like all their interactions just has me so excited for Silver Flames. That book is gonna be supreme enemies to lovers and banter. I just gotta put this out there. There's a lot of talk in this book about like the Court of Nightmares scene and chapter 55. Both stellar chapters. You're hearing no complaints from me about those. However, there's not enough talk about chapter 30. And you may be wondering, what is chapter 30? It's when Cassian is training Feyre, and like Rhys and Az are there too. And Cass just kind of like teases her a bit about the letter that she wrote to Tamlin, letting him know that she is no longer coming home. And Feyre gets defensive, obviously, and they start fighting again. And she's in her mind kind of walking through what has happened and finally coming to terms with the things that she did. And she finally vocalizes for the first time that she had killed those people, which she hadn't done up to this point, like out loud. Like the guilt that she feels about that, and how like her and Tamlin once worked, and she's like, I loved him. He's not inherently bad. He's just not good for her anymore. And like he's broken too. And just seeing her work through that is just beautiful. And then the fact when she burns through the sparring pads on Cassian's hands and he's like still willing to take her punches because he knows that she needs to get that out, and he's willing to be there and comfort her. And that moment just like, I love this moment for Feyre. I love it for Cassian. It's a great moment in their relationship, and this chapter is just like leaps and bounds. It's my favorite. I just think it's so like emotional, but like also so heartfelt, and I love every moment of it. Why do I sometimes picture Tarquin as a mermaid in my mind? Like him and Feyre will be talking, and all of a sudden I'll just picture him, like his torso and head, like on a mermaid body. I don't know why. I love the time spent in the Summer Court, mostly because I really like Tarquin. He is a character that I don't really know how he might fit in future books that Sarah J. Maas has planned, but I really like his character, and I would like more of him if he could fit into the story. I think out of like the other High Lords, he's the one that I'm by far the most interested in. He just seems like a genuinely good person in a world where that's like kind of hard to come by. I loved being in the Summer Court, just the picture that's painted. It just sounds very beautiful and picturesque. And as much as I love the Night Court and I like the Spring Court, it's just cool to get into those other settings. Okay, I just finished the Court of Nightmare scene, which we all know and love. This is the Rhys. As much as I love, like, good guy Rhys, bad guy Rhys just fucking hits different, and I love it. I kind of wish, I mean, in this book, we still get enough bad guy Rhys, but in Wings and Ruin, we don't really see any of that anymore. And it makes sense for his character, because his character is evolving and letting people see that he's actually, like, a good person. But kind of what I said in ACOTAR when I was reading that, and like that confrontation between him and Tamlin when he makes Tamlin get on his knees and beg, that Rhys, get it. I also just love to see that for everyone else too, like more getting the satisfaction of her dad's arms being broken. Fun time. Just family bonding activities. And same with Cassian and Az. And too, I just want to say, then when when Rhys and Feyre are on the throne, distracting everyone, when Rhys notices how she is reacting, and immediately he jumps to being like, it's okay, that's just your body reacting, like it's not a big deal, don't worry about it. Like that just like hits so different, knowing what he went through for 50 years with Amarantha. And that he almost like has to reassure himself of knowing like that was just his body's reaction. It's just Rhys, my man. I'm such a simp for Rhys. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I love this character so much. I mean, we all love the single bed trope, am I right? It's chapter 55. We know and we love it, but chapter 54, this is what I'm saying, like an entire book from Rhys's point of view would be incredible. Chapter 54 is like, I think like my second favorite chapter in like this whole book. One of my faves in the whole series. Is just, I'm almost done with the book. I think I have like 30 pages left, but the adder just attacked Valaris, so obviously Feyre, like a badass, defended it. And again, like, there's a lot of Rhys slander, and there is also a lot of Feyre slander too, and it's like, Feyre is not my favorite heroine of all time, but I do really love her, and I think this scene is like so badass and so awesome. And I know that there's like a lot of comparisons drawn between Aelin from Throne of Glass and Feyre from ACOTAR, because obviously they're like Sarah J. Maas's two biggest series, so you can't help but kind of make comparisons. And like, would I pick Aelin over Feyre? Yes. However, I think Feyre is an amazing heroine, and in this book, especially the journey that she goes through herself, and I think we often forget like where she came from and like where she started in the story to where she is by the end of Mist and Fury. And I just have mad respect for Feyre. Okay, so they're making the plan right now to go try to get the cauldron, which we all know how that ends up turning out in the end. But again, I get the critique that it's kind of repetitive, that Feyre's always like, Rhys is giving me a choice. And if that annoys you, fine. But I get why she does it, and I get from the mindset of Feyre of why that would be something that she takes notice of each and every time he gives her a choice, because of how badly she was treated by Tamlin and of how she never had a choice really her entire life until Rhys. So yes, in the scheme of things, it gets repetitive, but ultimately, since we're through Feyre's point of view, like, it makes sense why we get that reminder all the time. Or I think it's a pretty great representation of the healthy relationship that Feyre and Rhys have and the toxic and abusive relationship that her and Tamlin have. But oh, does he just boil my blood? This little asshole. So they're obviously in front of the King of Highburn, and Feyre's like, I will rip you apart. I will take away everything you hold dear. And first of all, I'm like, snaps and claps, bitch. Snaps and claps. And she does just that. Oh, I'm so excited for that when she like dismantles the whole spring court. But when she's telling him this, and all his response is that you don't know what you're talking about, I feel like other women out there know what I'm talking about, or have also been told you don't know what you're talking about, and how frustrating that is. Like, oh. Okay, one scene that I think is really actually benefiting me on this reread is everything that happens with the King of Highburn and the cauldron and Nesta and Elaine, and just everything that goes on in this scene, because there's so much that happened. I think before, the biggest thing was always like Feyre's sacrifice to let everyone get out and to save her sisters and Rhys and Cassian and Mor and Azriel, and her decision in that moment, which her thought process is like really, it comes across very clear, which I don't think I necessarily picked up on before. The line that got me was when she was like, they don't need me. And that's kind of like what Rhys almost does too. Like, they're both very self-sacrificial. It's just paying closer attention on the intentions behind Feyre's actions rather than Feyre's actions themselves. And then the other thing that stood out to me the most in this scene, it never really hit me that hard about Elaine and Nesta getting turned into Fae in this scene. I think because like, they are not my favorite characters, but I mean, like, we don't get a ton of them up to this point. So, like, yeah, I cared about them, I guess, but, like, not as much as the other characters in the scene. So I more cared about, like, Az and Cass being hurt and, like, Rhys and Feyre trying to get out. The absolute, like, atrocity of Elaine and Nesta being turned into Fae, I don't think really ever hit me before. And now I'm really like, fuck. Like, again, it doesn't excuse Nesta's attitude, but I think I'm very judgmental, or not judgmental, I'm not very forgiving with either Elaine or Nesta in the next book. So I'm just interested now that I've kind of like absorbed the atrocity a bit more of what happened to them in the scene, to see if I'll see them any differently in the next book. It's just so horrible. Also, just Az's rage when the king like makes a little suggestive comment at Mor. I love Az so much, and if he does not get his own book, I'm gonna be so pissed. And if Mor doesn't get her own book, like, I need Mor to have a happily ever after all the shit that she has been through, and I need Azriel to also have a happily ever after all the shit that he has been through. That book is just so good, and that ending is just insane. The final line, I can just hear the music. I always liked her and Lucian's dynamic, but I think like right in this scene when he's just like not having any of her bullshit, but Tamlin's stupid enough to buy it, or blind enough by love to buy it, and Lucian knows. I think this first like opening chapter of Rhys kind of talking about how he used to check all of the dead on the battlefield for Cassian and Az every time after a fight years ago, I think that's again another reason why this would have been a beneficial book to have, partly from his POV, because yes, the war is scary through Feyre's point of view, But I think Rhys would have been interesting because he has the prior experience of having already been in a war, have more of the trauma of past wars, and that experience weighing heavily on the new war rather than like Feyre's fresher perspective. Okay, once again, I love this scene so much when at the Solstice when Feyre steals Ianthe's thunder. It's so satisfying to see Ianthe put in her place a little bit. Okay, I love a good even-keeled banter, and that is what Jurian and Feyre kind of have right now, and I'm living for it. I don't really remember necessarily having a super strong opinion on Jurian one way or the other. Obviously in Mist and Fury, you're like, this dude sucks. But in this one already, like, he's kind of a fun character to add into the mix when you already have so many established characters. I think it's kind of hard to introduce new ones, and I think it gets lost even on me, like the kindness that Feyre has towards people when she's having like all these badass moments and she's like outsmarting Ianthe, and genuinely down to her soul, Feyre is like a very kind person, and I just think it's really beautiful. And I really like her and Alice's little relationship that they've built over the books, however small, you know. And when Feyre says like that she'll always have a friend in her court, and that Alice knew which one she was talking about. That scene out on the winter, in the winter court out on the ice, man, when Az and Cassian show up, I can just hear the music in my head. I can see it play out in front of me. It's just, I love that scene so much. I just absolutely love how some people are like, Azriel barely even talked and we're all like simping over him. Because that's me. I love Azriel and I cannot wait for his book. I mean, I'm super excited for Silver Flames. Obviously, that's why I'm rereading all these, because I can't wait for the Cassian and Nesta content. But I am just so excited for an Azriel book. However, if Azriel and Elaine, I really vibe with him. I love his like cold, unyielding personality. I vibe. It's always the quiet ones. Always the quiet ones. I'm so excited. It's my favorite scene in all of the books coming up here. We're about to head into the High Lord's meeting. This scene, I remember the first time I read it, just like being shocked by how good it was, and I'm so excited to go back into it now. I think it is just insane. I think it's so crazy. One, the amount of characters in it. Two, the amount of like histories and backstories of these people and the conflicts and who likes who doesn't like who has tension with who, and having to keep track of that, but then also like not losing sight of like why they're all there, and just everything about the scene is so good, and I'm so excited to read it again. One thing I never noticed was how much more is just constantly ignored. Like, not within the inner circle, but by other people. I don't know how many times, like, she'll say something to someone, and then it's just that, like, Tamlin ignored her wholly. Like, Tamlin is ignoring her in this meeting. Tarquin ignored her in the summer court after the battle there. Her father always ignores her. Eris always ignores her. Like, give my queen more the respect that she deserves. There's something about this cold rage that I just fucking live for. And Az just attacked Eris because he called Moore a slut. And I'm like, snaps and claps for you, Az. Get on him. Also, I forgot to make any comments on Tamlin in this scene because Tamlin just fucking sucks. And like, if he has to resort to those type of sexual innuendos and putting Feyre down for having ownership of her body and doing with it what she pleases, Tamlin, get out of here. We're in the first kind of battle of this book against Highburn. I just want to say, as Feyre's talking about how Rhys, Cassian, and Az all have like their helmets with like the raven wings on them and like with their swords attached to them, I was just thinking about this. I don't think I've ever seen a fan art of them in like their battle uniforms. You know, like, someone more artistic than me, please make this, because that'd be really hot. Like, I'm just imagining the three of them right now. Like, I don't know why reading about them in war, I'm like, I love it. But it's fun. So, anyway, someone get on that fan art, please. I just think that, like, Feyre gets docked for not fighting in some of these battle sequences, but she's still just as much of like a badass as Aelin is. But Feyre does not, like, she was not a soldier. Like, Aelin grew up being an assassin. Like, she knows her way around the battlefield and knows how to fight and kill. So her and Kingdom of Ash, like, fighting on the front lines makes sense. Feyre just, like, hunted rabbits to eat. Like, she was not a fighter until Mist and Fury, when she got these powers and was learning. And yes, she's been training, but like, she is still very new to her power and to like war, where that was not something that was foreign to Aelin. So for Feyre to be like, I think I can use my powers in different ways and like maybe not be on the front lines, I don't dock her for it, because she would only cause issues if she was down on the front lines and didn't know what she was doing. Like, they would all just be like, we need to watch out for her, and not like being able to be fully in the moment defending themselves. Like, as Cass, Moore, Rhys, they would all be like worried about Feyre. The surreal man, he was a real one. R.I.P. man. Elaine's rescue mission in Highburn's camp is just such a fun scene. We have so many great players in it. We love him, but I don't love him and Elaine together. I just think it's way too convenient for three sisters, three of the bad boys, to all end up together. Like, I'm just not a fan. Also, I just don't think that like Elaine and Az would be like a dynamic couple, but I do like their friendship. I think they could have a really great friendship, so I like that. Jurian, I'm actually kind of vibing with. I kind of forgot that he's kind of a mood, so I don't know, I kind of like him. The ending to that, when Nesta, Feyre, and Elaine all like sleep together in a tent just like they used to back at their house, it's just like, the sisters bond is great. Like, as messed up as their dynamic can be sometimes, like the three of them, no matter what, would go to bat for each other. Well, I know Feyre for sure would. Like, we've seen that time and time again. I hope that Nesta and Elaine both would in the future. I want to see more of that in upcoming books. Like, I'm hoping in Silver Flames we maybe get more into the sister dynamic, as well as just like her and Cassian. I knew this moment was coming, this very frustrating moment. Feyre basically forcing Moore to come out to her. There's no like defending Feyre's actions, and I don't like how it all came to be. Like, all I can say is that like Feyre's actions are wrong, and her insinuating that Moore was like lying about her sexuality rather than just like not talking about it with anyone are like two very different things. And like, just because someone isn't out doesn't mean that they're like should be perceived as a liar. So Moore is a queen, and I'm just sad that like this happens to her character. So I just hope for better things for Moore in the future, and this was not Feyre's moment at all. I feel so stupid every time I get on here crying, but Rhys's speech before the final battle gets me every time. As much as I love like the dynamic between Rhys and Feyre, and like obviously a lot of romance stories, like it's between the main characters, but the friendship and family that all of these characters have together is just, it's everything I want. Okay, so this is editing me. So I'm editing and I'm just realizing that I never updated in Wings and Ruin after the battle whatsoever. I updated after I finished the book itself and never gave any thoughts on the battle, so I just thought I would jump on here quick. First of all, when Nesta yells Cassian's name to bring him out of that line that Highburn hit, oh my god. I remember like screaming the first time that I read that. And when she decides that she needs to go and be a distraction with Cassian, and they have that moment, like Cassian, Nesta, Feyre, and Rhys, and Cassian and Nesta leave, and Rhys turns to Feyre and he's like, they're not coming back. I still got anxious, even though I knew how this ended. And Nesta squaring off against the King of Highburn. Thank God that she got that final kill. Yes, Elaine got that stab in. I'm so glad that both of the sisters had their moment against him, that Elaine got to stab him and Nesta got to finish off the job. They deserved it, and I'm very glad. And I can't wait for Nesta to be able to track down the queens, because she's gonna have some business to take care of with them as well, so I'm excited for that. in this whole battle, I love the pacing of it and also the moments of heart in the battle, and I think none other better exemplified of this than when Nesta and Cassian have their moment. While she's fighting Highburn and Cassian is trying to help her out, but he is so injured that he can't do anything, but it still does not stop him from crawling after her. Tamlin, learn a fucking lesson. That's what you do. Then when Nesta decides to cover Cassian's body with her own to die with him, oh my god, that is everything to me. Cassian's line of saying, "My only regret is that I wish we had more time." Bitch, fucking stop. Silver Flames is gonna be amazing, and I can't wait for a whole book of these two. Like, these two characters are just gonna make such a great book, and I'm so excited. And in that battle, in that moment, it does so much for the two of their characters to set them up for the next book, and I'm glad that Elaine got like her little part in it, because let's be honest, Elaine doesn't do a lot. And this moment too is something that Nesta's never seen war and Elaine hasn't seen war either. And to be fair, Feyre never had either, but she had like experienced more than Nesta and Elaine had. So for Nesta to go through this battle, and then it makes sense why she is the way that she is in Frost and Starlight. Again, as I said, it doesn't excuse her behavior, but it at least gives us insight. And I think that Silver Flames is just going to explore that so much more. So anyways, I don't know why I didn't give it any check-ins at the time, but those are my thoughts right now. So I just finished Wings and Ruin. Just some things that, like, even still after a few rereads, still I'm like, I don't really get it. I don't really get how Rhys came back to life, unless if it was just that small tether. And then all of the High Lords Colonels like didn't do anything. Because then when he woke up, he's like, all like, don't worry, I didn't take any of it. Like that, I could have used a little more clarification on. Also how Amren just like all of a sudden popped out alive. That kind of came out of nowhere as well. I like Amren, and I'm glad that she's around because I would like to get more of her character in the future, but I kind of also would have liked if she would have just died. I know that sounds bad, but like, if you know anything about me, I'm a big proponent of character death, and I think it would have been a good ending for her character. Nesta, girl's gonna go through it, and I can't wait for Silver Flames. I love that book. It's definitely my favorite of the three. I mean, I love Mist and Fury as well, but I don't know, there's something about Wings and Ruin that I really like. And I'm excited to jump into Frost and Starlight, because Frost and Starlight is by far my least favorite, but I'm still excited to get into it, mostly to just get the setup for Silver Flames. So yeah. So I've actually taken quite a bit of a break in between finishing Wings and Ruin, and now I'm going to jump into Frost and Starlight. I've only read this one once. So while I've reread the other ones a couple of times, this is only the second time I'm going to be reading this. It's not that I'm not excited for it, but I'm not excited. It's kind of boring. I remember it being kind of boring. I do like in this, if I remember right, point of views change a lot more. I personally liked having ACOTAR from Feyre's point of view, but as I said, I would have liked at some points with like Rhys getting his point of view at certain times. But in this, I like that it switches up quite a bit, and if I do remember right, it really sets up like Nesta and Cassian well. I just have to say that I think this is one of my favorite covers. I think this cover is stunning. Like, I love the black with then the white detailing and the gold print. Like, it's just a pretty cover. Okay, so this is the end of the video. I actually finished Frost and Starlight a few days ago, and I didn't really do that many check-ins during that book. One, because it's not really a book, it's like a novella. And it's just, I didn't have a lot to say about it. I mean, like, it's fine, I like it, but it's not unnecessary, because I think if you would have jumped straight from Wings and Ruin into Silver Flames, granted, I don't know where Silver Flames starts, but I think we needed that bit like in between the war and Silver Flames picking up. Like, we needed to see a bit of that aftermath with like Rhys and Feyre and Az and Amren and Cassian and Nesta and Elaine, like all of them and more. We needed to see that. However, like, yeah, is a lot of it really that dynamic? No, but I personally like it because it is just like about the characters. It's not plot driven, and I don't mind that. I said it once and I'll say it again. Nesta is extremely just like rude. And I'm not saying that, don't come at me, Nesta stans. I'm not saying that I don't like Nesta or that I don't get why she is like so rude. But it's just like the way that she treats Feyre is, and Rhys, and everyone is just so not okay in my book no matter what. But with that said, I am so excited to see her and Cassian in Silver Flames. I think this book is going to be like explosive. I have very high expectations for it. I think it's going to be incredible and I cannot wait. I cannot wait to get more. As much as I loved Rhys and Feyre, I am excited to get more on the other characters and getting in their point of views, because I liked in Frost and Starlight how we got multiple POVs. And I will have a Silver Flames reading vlog up. I'm so excited. So anyways, thank you for watching this. If you like reading vlog kind of videos, if you haven't already, I do have 2 Throne of Glass reading vlogs. I read that for the first time last summer. So I did have to split it up into 2 videos because it was long, but that was a lot of fun. And yeah, otherwise I will see you guys for Silver Flames.